The city knew him as a powerful billionaire who controlled companies, banks, and buildings. But no one understood the silence inside his life. He was born deaf, and from the first moment of his life, the world around him moved in quiet motion without a single sound. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments what time is it and where are you watching from. Let's start. His parents spent millions on doctors, treatments, and specialists, hoping one day their son might finally hear a voice. But every hospital visit ended the same way, with doctors lowering their eyes and explaining that nothing could change his condition. Growing up in luxury did not make life easier for him, because silence followed him everywhere, even in crowded rooms. He watched people laugh, argue, celebrate, and cry, but all of it happened behind an invisible wall he could never cross. Over time, the boy became a man who trusted numbers more than people, building an empire where emotions had no place. Employees respected him, feared him, and followed his strict rules, yet none of them truly knew the lonely man behind the wealth. His mansion stood high above the city skyline, filled with expensive art, security guards, and rooms that always felt too quiet. One morning, the agency sent a new maid to work in that mansion, a young woman who came from a poor, struggling family. No one in that house realized that this simple woman would soon reveal something that would make the silent billionaire freeze. The young maid walked into the mansion quietly, her small bag in hand, eyes careful as she looked at the world of wealth. She had grown up in a tiny neighborhood where every dollar mattered, and this job meant survival for her family. Her mother was sick, her little brother still in school, and she carried the heavy weight of responsibility alone. The mansion staff barely noticed her arrival, because in a house this large, maids came and went all the time. But she was different in one quiet way that no one there could understand yet. Since childhood, she had learned sign language to speak with someone very close to her heart. Her younger brother had been born deaf, just like the billionaire who owned this house. Because of him, her hands spoke a language of patience, care, and silent understanding. On her first day, she was cleaning the long wooden shelves inside the billionaire's private office. The man sat behind his large desk, reviewing documents with sharp eyes, completely focused on his work. She noticed the hearing devices and medical files neatly placed on the table beside him. And, in that moment, something inside her mind connected a truth that made her stop moving for a second. The young maid stood quietly beside the bookshelf, holding a cleaning cloth, while carefully observing the silent man at the desk. The billionaire's eyes stayed fixed on the documents, his face calm, but his world remained locked in deep silence. She noticed the small medical devices near his files and realized the powerful man could not hear anything around him. Memories of her little brother suddenly rushed into her mind, the same silence, the same lonely struggle. Since childhood, she had spoken to her brother using sign language, a quiet language built from patience and love. While others ignored her brother or treated him differently, she learned how to communicate without a single sound. Now she looked again at the billionaire, wondering if his life had been the same painful story. All the wealth in this mansion suddenly felt meaningless compared to the silence he lived with every day. For a moment she hesitated, unsure if someone like her should even try speaking to a man so powerful. But something in her heart pushed her forward, reminding her of the promise she once made to her brother. She slowly stepped closer to the desk, hoping not to disturb him while he worked. Then, carefully, gently, she raised her hands and made the first simple sign anyone had ever used in front of him. The billionaire suddenly noticed movement in front of him and slowly lifted his eyes from the papers on his desk. For a second, he looked confused, watching the maid's hands move in a language he had not seen in years. Most people around him used phones, tablets, or written notes to communicate with him. But this woman was speaking with her hands, forming clear signs he understood immediately. His face froze, not in anger, but in pure shock that someone in this mansion knew his silent language. The maid nervously signed a simple message, asking politely if he needed anything cleaned in the office. For the first time in a long while, the billionaire felt something unusual inside his chest. Someone was speaking to him directly, not through a screen, not through an assistant, but through real understanding. He slowly stood from his chair, his eyes locked on her hands as if afraid the moment might disappear. Carefully, almost unsure, he raised his own hands and replied with a short sign asking where she learned it. The maid explained that her little brother had been born deaf, and she had learned sign language to talk with him. The moment she finished that sentence, the billionaire's expression changed, as if a buried memory had just awakened. The billionaire stood still for a moment, staring at the maid as if the past had suddenly returned to his life. Her simple explanation about her deaf brother touched a memory he had buried deep for many years. When he was a child, his parents once hired a tutor who taught him sign language to help him communicate. For a short time, that teacher had made his silent world feel a little less lonely. But as his parents focused more on medical treatments and expensive technology, those lessons slowly stopped. Over the years, he forgot most of the signs, and the people around him stopped using them completely. Communication became cold and practical, always through screens, text, or assistants translating messages. Looking at the maid now, he suddenly remembered what it felt like to speak without machines. He slowly signed another question, asking about her brother and how long she had cared for him. The maid smiled softly and explained that she had been his voice and ears since they were children. Her words carried quiet strength, the kind that only comes from years of family sacrifice. And something about that honesty made the billionaire realize this woman understood his world better than anyone in his mansion. The billionaire slowly sat back down, but his eyes never left the maid standing quietly across the desk. For years, people around him treated his silence like a problem that needed expensive solutions. Doctors promised miracles, investors offered new technologies, and specialists spoke about experimental treatments. Yet none of them ever truly understood the emotional weight of living in complete silence. But this maid understood without asking many questions, because she had lived beside the same silence. She told him how her brother often felt invisible in crowded places where no one knew his language. Sometimes people spoke loudly at him, thinking volume could somehow replace understanding. Other times they ignored him completely, as if his silence made him less important. The billionaire listened through her signs carefully, feeling an uncomfortable truth growing in his chest. All his wealth had built a powerful empire, yet it had never built real connection. For the first time in many years, he felt something close to regret. And then the maid slowly reached into her small bag and pulled out something that made him freeze. The billionaire's eyes fixed on the small object resting in the maid's hand, his expression suddenly tense with curiosity. It was an old hearing aid device, simple and slightly worn, nothing like the expensive technology in his office. The maid gently explained through signs that this was her brother's first hearing device from many years ago. It did not give perfect hearing, but it helped him feel connected to the world in a small way. She told him her brother cried the first day he heard even the faintest sound through it. For their poor family, that moment felt like a miracle that money could never measure. The billionaire looked at the small device carefully, memories flooding back from his own childhood struggles. He remembered how his parents chased the most advanced medical solutions, ignoring simpler possibilities. Sometimes the most human solutions were lost behind pride, money, and endless complicated treatments. The maid then signed something that made his expression grow even more serious. She told him there was a specialist who had helped her brother years ago with a rare hearing method. And hearing those words, the billionaire felt hope return to a heart that had believed miracles no longer existed. The billionaire held the small hearing device in his hands, staring at it as if it carried the weight of his entire life. For years, he had believed money could buy every solution, yet the simplest hope had entered his office through a maid. He looked at her again, realizing she had given him something no doctor or expert had offered before. Not technology, not promises, but the courage to believe that his silence might not be permanent. Within weeks, he contacted the specialist the maid had mentioned and decided to try the treatment. The process was long, uncertain, and filled with fear. But for the first time, he did not feel alone. The maid supported him quietly through every step, reminding him that miracles sometimes arrive through ordinary people. Months later, during one final test, the billionaire heard something faint but real for the very first time. It was not music or a voice, just a small sound from a machine, yet tears filled his eyes instantly. In that moment, he understood that the greatest gift in his life had come from kindness, not power. He later changed the maid's life too, helping her family and supporting deaf children across the country. The story ends here, but the mystery lives on. Like, subscribe, and return for the next unforgettable journey.